Good evening, everyone. Welcome, Vice Mayor and Council Member. I call this regular meeting of the Albany City Council for October 7th, 2024 to order. I would ask Council Member Jordan if he would read the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mayor. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of the Shawn. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe, and together build a better future for all that now make this their home.
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. City Clerk, can you please call roll?
Councilmember Hanson-Romero.
Here.
Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
Councilmember Tiedemann.
Here.
Vice Mayor Lopez.
Here.
Mayor Mackey.
Here. Thank you, City Clerk. I call on Councilmember Tiedemann, who'd like to say an opening statement.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just wanted to wish anyone who is celebrating a Shana Tova for Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, and request that we close the meeting with a moment of silence for those who were lost on this day a year ago, as well as those who were lost or hurt in the year since.
Thank you, Councilmember Tiedemann. There were no closed actions, so there's nothing to report today. There are no ceremonial matters today either, so we'll move on to item 5, City Manager's report. City Manager, may the council have your report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to acknowledge the work of our public safety departments and their expertise in responding to a couple of fires we've experienced on Albany Hill over the past month, both on September 25th and also on September 11th. They were extinguished in significantly quick amount of time, and really just the responsiveness and professionalism of our team collaborating together on this very sensitive open space area. We are continuing to regularly monitor the hill basically on a 24-hour basis to ensure the well-being of the residents in that area and really manage any potential issues that could arise. So you will see our staff out there quite a bit, and appreciate everybody's due diligence in sharing any issues that they may see, and of course reporting them. That helps us respond. A reminder that this month is Crime Prevention Month. Remember your safety, the safety of your family and neighborhood. Our police department has posted a number of resources on our website and also sent out a community notification on this important topic. Some of those items include the value of installing camera systems and also the opportunity to share that camera information with the police department. It has helped in addressing crime that can arise in our community. The sidewalk repairs, phase 9. So we've gone 1 through 9, is substantially complete. And this project consisted of 40 locations for a total of approximately 5,500 square feet of sidewalk and replacement. I'd also like to reiterate that we keep a very live, active website with regard to all public works projects. So please take the opportunity to look at that if you have questions about projects, as the status updates are posted regularly. November 5th is an important date. Our vote by mail box was just opened today, as the city clerk informed me. And this will be our Tuesday, November 5th election. We have a box right out here in the back parking lot where you can drop your vote by mail ballot, and that will of course be open through that date. Also, a couple of newer features that you can do when you drop something off and wonder where it's going. You can track your ballot, and the city clerk is showing you here on the Secretary of State's website how you can track your ballot and see it find its destination into counting. There will also be an early voting ballot drop stop event held by the Alameda County Register of Voters in front of the Albany Community Center Library on Marin Avenue on October 14th and 15th, between 10 to 4 p.m., and that will assist voters as needed. You can also continue to monitor the Alameda County Registrar of Voters webpage, as they will have updates during the election as well. And we have a ranked choice voting information session. Great timing in advance of your ballot to help understand the uniqueness of Albany's election method and how to ensure your votes are counted. This will occur on October 15th from 6 to 8 p.m. Uniquely and thoughtfully, this will be a hybrid session held both in person here in the City Council chambers and on Zoom. For more information, please check albanyca.org/RCV. A reminder that campaign signs, voting signs of any type, need to be on private property. This is monitored, and if signs are in the public right-of-way, meaning the area in between the sidewalk and private property, or in a median or other public area, they will be removed. Also, it's Fire Prevention Week. Began yesterday, October 6th. This year's theme is Smoke Alarms, Make Them Work For You. And in concert with Fire Prevention Week, a reminder that the Albany Fire Department is hosting their annual pancake breakfast and open house on October 12th, this weekend, Saturday from 8 to noon at the fire station. Always a packed event, so please take the opportunity to enjoy the hard work of our department. I'd also like to add a footnote to this event. Based on the willingness and fortitude of our staff in their proactive approach to sustainability and environmental awareness. As the council remembers, you adopted a foodware ordinance at your last meeting just weeks ago. Instead of the 12-month implementation that could be enabled, our staff really flipped the switch and was able to facilitate sustainable foodware service, both for the pancake breakfast as well as our Coffee with a Cop event. So really applaud their willingness to change course so quickly and their positivity around it. Also on October 12th, we have a compost giveaway. It begins at 8 a.m. until supplies run out, and it seems that supplies usually run out. So please take advantage of this event as well. It's free compost, and it's given out at Memorial Park on the Carmel Avenue side of the park. We had some really fantastic events recently. I'll give you a quick overcap. The Senior Center Open House, thanks to the outreach and engagement by our staff in that department, over 250 community members attended the Senior Center Open House on October 27th. That may be a record. The day included class demonstration and community presentations, representatives from a number of service organizations, including Albany CERT, and Friends of Albany seniors were in attendance to get our seniors connected and provide helpful information for them. We also had a Friends of Albany Parks Cleanup Day on October 28th. Oh, that wouldn't have happened yet. Where they attended a cleanup at Memorial Park and weeding, planting, and mulching. So thank you to the Albany Community Foundation for helping sponsor that event and supporting the volunteers. The Albany Arts Committee, advisory to the City Council, if you may recall, engaged with some upcoming communication and conversations with our community in a program called Path to Belonging. An invitation to all to come to the Albany Community Center on October 13th and 27th from 1 to 4:30 p.m. for the first activity in Path to Belonging. As a reminder, this is a year-long program of fun and thoughtful arts, activities that aim to build a sense of community in Albany. Participants will make artist books about home and homeowners near and far, and reservations are required. There is a Google site, sites.google.com/view Path to Belonging for more information. And importantly, I want to spend a minute to acknowledge that the city's active transportation plan kickoff is forthcoming on October 24th. Save the date, 5:30 to 8 p.m. for a drop-in open house at the community center, where we'll be kicking off planning for a new active transportation plan. As a reminder, the active transportation plan really helps us outline and prioritize our transportation safety projects and programs. So this is really a critical area for people to get involved. Something on your street that's bothering you, in your neighborhood, around the schools, just in your daily coming and going. Your input is much needed and welcome at this open house. This will not, of course, be the only opportunity, simply the kickoff, where you'll have some ability to get active and engage with the consultants. We also have a website that will be another living document and resource, as depicted here, with a short link, I appreciate, bit.ly/Albany ATP. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. If anyone,
I'm so sorry, Mayor. I'd also like to ask our city attorney to provide an update on the litigation regarding the Albany Cross.
Thank you. When the city acquired Albany Hill Park, it was encumbered with an easement that allowed for the cross that was already in place. After litigation ensued between the city and the Lions Club in 2018, a federal judge made clear that the cross on public property violated the Establishment Clause. Given this concern, the city made the decision to condemn the easement and remove the cross. As part of the eminent domain litigation to condemn the easement and remove the cross, the city successfully defended numerous challenges and claims brought by the Lions Club to try and block the removal of the cross. As part of the litigation, the city established that it had the right to remove the cross and condemn the easement, and that in doing so, the city did not infringe on anyone's rights. To end the ongoing litigation, the city recently stipulated to a judgment with the Lions Club to avoid additional litigation expenses. The judgment allows the city to condemn the easement and remove the cross, which the city already has done, that existed on Albany Hill Park for the benefit of the Lions Club. The judgment requires the city to pay the Lions Club $1,530,000 for acquisition of their property interest. $500,000 of that has already been set aside with the state condemnation fund. Additionally, the judgment fully resolves any and all claims the Lions Club may have had regarding the city's removal of the cross and gives the city legal title to the entirety of the property and completely clears title of the easement that previously existed on the park. This resolves the matter, and therefore Lions Club has no legal right to use the property for the easement or to maintain the cross on the property, which the city had already removed.
thank you for that update. If anyone attending would like to ask a question about or comment on the city manager's report, for those in the audience, if you could raise your hands, or those online, please press the raise your hand button, sorry.
No one online.
All right. Not seeing any comments, I'll bring it back to council for any.
Sorry, there's one hand.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I had a couple comments. The path to belonging and the active transportation plan, I was wondering if they were, besides being on websites, if they were being posted somewhere, and if they are, like in the community center, the library, around town, wherever, so people who don't aren't looking for things online would know about them. And if so, if the font on those could be large. The glass box that's outside the library has a lot of notices in there, and the font is probably maybe 6 points. I'm not really sure. It's the tiniest font I've ever seen on anything. So if things are being posted, it would be great if the font could be legible to people who's don't have a magnifying glass with them. And so anyway, I'm just encouraging you to advertise in ways besides the website. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Bringing it back to council, any questions or comments for the city manager's report? Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Jordan.
I'd just like to thank the police department and the fire department for pivoting to reusable. I finally remembered to bring something reusable myself, and I'm impressed that you've made that shift. So thank you so much for doing that. And I want to thank the city clerk's office for continually patrolling and clearing landscape strips and medians so that we don't end up looking at Albany like some adjacent cities that will not go mentioned. So thank you for doing that work.
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. We'll move on to item 6, Good of the City. On Good of the City, this is for attendees to provide the council comments, information, and questions on an item that is not on the agenda. Please raise your hand now online, or if you're in the room, please fill out a comment card. If you haven't filled out a comment card, if you could raise your hands just so we know if there are others. Okay,
I have.
all right.
So Sandy and Michael, go ahead.
Yes, let me find my spot here. I'm Michael Hannon, resident of Piedmont, actually, but a member of the Alameda County Grand Jury Association, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization of former grand jurors. And among our duties and responsibilities is to monitor and implement past grand jury reports, and one in particular was the 2021 report on the need for fairness and accuracy in ballot language. Ballot language is prepared by jurisdictions without any review by anyone other than those in favor of it. It was the conclusion of the report that virtually every ballot language, the 75 words that the voters we know or will see, had a strong proponent bias and extraneous language, and they exaggerate the benefits and gloss over the costs. The 75 words are the only thing that we know every voter will see. State law requires ballot language to be, see where I am here, a true and impartial synopsis of the purpose of the proposed measure, and shall be in language that is neither argumentative nor likely to create a prejudice for or against the measure. Unfortunately, many jurisdictions violate the law by exaggerating the benefits and glossing over the cost, as well as adding extreme verbiage designed to favor passage of the measure. No one other than the agency promoting the measure is required to approve the agency's language. To counteract that, there is a need for active and consistent monitoring and evaluation of local government's ballot language, also known as ballot titles. This current Alameda County Grand Jury Association effort implements the findings of the 2021 Alameda County Civil Grand Jury Report, the need for accuracy and impartiality of ballot measure questions. We evaluated 34 different ballot measures all over the county, from Pleasanton to Albany to Fremont, and the average score was it's like a Yelp score, 5 to 5. The average was 2.91. I want to congratulate Albany because all but one were above average, but they weren't necessarily. It's not necessarily good, but because all of them suffered from some degree of proponent bias. So I'm down to 13 seconds here. We have another speaker here from the same group who will go over the measures. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
After Sandy, it will be Stephen and Celeste.
Hi, I'm Sandy McCabe, also with the Alameda County Civil Grand Jury Association. As Mike mentioned, you guys managed to put on one of the highest rated of all, number 4.5. That was Measure C, the sidewalk and pathway. The only thing that was missing on that, and we're talking about just the ballot language on that first thing that people see, not all the stuff. And we are absolutely not pro or con or liberal, Democrat. This has nothing to do with whether the measure itself is good or bad, strictly the language in that. that ended up with the 4.5. The only thing it was missing was what the existing tax was. Otherwise, it would have gotten a 5, which would have been amazing. The least, unfortunately, was at a score of 2.5. One of the lowest was the Measure V, the youth voting. And there's a few things that were really problematic with that. In its language was that it not only had 2 issues that were unrelated, which is not allowed in measures, but also it didn't indicate what the expenses, what the financial implications of this would be, which would be required. The others, the bonding limit, which was Measure U, was a 3.6. T was the, and I could go over it. What I sent to the council, this whole packet that was specific, explained how the system works and how the gradation works, what the criteria are for whether it's bond or tax. And I sent it, and hopefully each of you received a copy of this. If not, I will be sending each of you specifically an email that will have Albany's information and what the criteria is. Our hope is that we'll continue to do this with the idea that hopefully it won't be necessary down the road. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Stephen Alpert. Last week, city officials received an overview of this presentation. Tonight, I'll review a blatant lie and non-responses and obfuscation by various city officials as to why Albany follows only the minimum state mandate of alerting those within 300 feet of proposed new construction, regardless of project size, when in fact, for years, other municipalities have varied notification distances based on project size. First, the lie and example of non-response. Community Development Director Bond wrote that existing state law precluded issuing citywide alerts for new construction. For more than 6 weeks, Director Bond ignored my request that he document this assertion. Only pursuant to a request for records under the Public Records Act did he forward a 6-page state law, 2002 Planning and Zoning Law, noting that subsection 4A details the minimum state mandate. On the very same page, subsection 5C clearly contradicts his assertion that state law prevents citywide alerts for new construction. Director Bond was non-responsive and knowingly lied. Responding to my suggestion that the city enact different area notices for small and large-scale projects, on April 1st, Councilman Jordan asserted that existing state law would, quote, open the city to legal exposure if it were to pursue different noticing distances on a project based on project size. On April 8th, I submitted a request for records for documentation of the state laws that he referenced. Specifically, I asked state laws relevant to different public notice for small versus large-scale projects. The reply, there is no responsive document to your request. Given that I explicitly requested documents pertaining to state law, and a request recently did reference state law, one would reasonably conclude that this latter response also reflected a search for state law. On the basis of that communication, I accused Councilman Jordan of inventing and citing non-existent state law to avoid addressing the issue of 300 feet notification. At this juncture, in April, Councilman Jordan or the city attorney could have explained that this communication did not, in fact, reflect a search for state law. However, both waited until September 16 to clarify that Public Records Act does not obligate the city clerk to search for state law, but rather only provide those documents already on hand. Councilman Jordan and Attorney Subramanian, why wait 5 months before offering that the city was only required to produce documents that exist, unquote, when this issue was relevant in April and likely would have prevented repeated public accusations of lying? A clear example of non-response and obfuscation. My wife, Celeste, will continue this presentation.
After Celeste will be Bob and Susan.
Thank you. During the April 15th meeting and multiple times thereafter, Councilman Jordan was asked to provide these state laws he referenced on April 1st. He did not respond until June 17th, stating, "The city attorney explained in the May 20 meeting why the notification distances cannot vary based on the size of the project, citing state law. If anyone is interested, I encourage you to go watch her explanation." As reviewed during the September 16th meeting, in her May 20th remarks, the city attorney did not reference one of two state laws Councilman Jordan finally provided on September 3rd, which he asserts could cause legal exposure for the city. The state laws cited by both city officials distinctly do not mention or address different noticing distances for new construction based on project size. When asked why it took him 5 months to produce the state laws he referenced in April, despite repeated public accusations that he lied, Councilman Jordan claimed he was too busy with other city matters. Really? Councilman Jordan and city attorney contend that the two state laws might be construed to preclude a municipality from implementing different notification distances based on project size. Years of real-world experience indicate these assertions are not supported by case law. In response to emails regarding the City of Beverly Hills practice of using 500 and 1,000-foot notifications since 2014, and whether this practice had ever resulted in legal challenges, Community Development Director Michael Ford replied, "It is not uncommon for cities to have different noticing requirements depending on the type or size of the project and depending on the decision-making authority." In separate email exchanges, Mark Odell, Urban Design Manager for Beverly Hills, concurred with Mr. Forbes. Verbatim copies of these emails were provided to Albany city officials. In marked contrast to the non-responses by Councilman Jordan and the city attorney, both Beverly Hills officials provided next day detailed responses, fully aware that we do not reside in Beverly Hills. The responses forwarded by the two Beverly Hills officials refute assertions that state laws preclude different notification distances based on project size. The city officials of Beverly Hills have absolutely no reason not to be factual, given the blatant lie by direct and Bod, and for reasons unknown. This council refuses to submit 300-foot notification as a meeting agenda item. Can the same be said about various Albany city officials? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Hello, I'm Bob Outis. It's been a long time since I've been here, but it's nice to be back. In reading the literature I've been receiving in opposition to Measure R, I've learned that I'm a member of two protected classes. First of all, I'm a senior, and secondly, I'm a residential tenant. As I read the brochures, I discovered they were paid for by an organization called the Community Coalition of Albany Seniors and Small Businesses. So I'm not only a member of two protected classes, I'm a member of the supporting cast. That is, I own a modest local law office. Given that I fit the profile so closely, I then wondered why I had not been asked to join with this coalition. After all, I've been a residential tenant in Albany for the last 12 years. I've maintained a small business on Solano Avenue for over 40 years, and I'm well into my senior years. So I decided to look at the coalition's campaign filings, which are available on the internet. When I did so, I discovered that the treasurer of the organization is a person whose website says she's the executive director of the Berkeley Property Owners Association. She also states on her website, and I quote, "She has called East Oakland her home for 33 years. The principal officer of the coalition is identified as a young attorney whom I happen to know a little bit. He's a nice fellow, but he lives in the Marina Bay area of Richmond. I also happen to know that he does legal work for the Berkeley Property Owners Association. I could find no evidence in reviewing the online records of the county recorder that either of these persons owns in her or his own name any Albany real property. But I thought, since this is a coalition of Albany seniors and small businesses, surely some persons fitting that description must have made contributions to the coalition. So I looked further at the campaign filings, and I found only one donor. Specifically, that donor is the National Association of Realtors, which is said to be located in Chicago, my old hometown. A nice place, by the way. It is reported to have contributed $29,650 to the coalition. To drive the point home, there is no reported record that any senior, any residential tenant, or any small business owner, whether in Albany or otherwise, has made any donation to this community coalition. Why, though, do I come here to make this statement? There are two reasons other than disclosing the foregoing facts. First of all, well, I guess I'm about out of time, but I want to say that I took the time to read the measure. It is very well written, and I commend the council for putting it before voters. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Susan?
Good evening, City Council. My name is Susan Moffett, and I was honored to have been selected for the Albany Creative Justice Art Project, and I didn't know that it would be mentioned during the city manager's report, so I wanted to come tonight and just invite everybody warmly to our first event and to know more about the project. But thank you very much for featuring it, and I also want to let you know that we have an easier URL now. It's pathtobelonging.net. And we also now are on Instagram at Path to Belonging and on Facebook. And in response to the question posed earlier, we have posted flyers in large font, I hope it's large enough, to let people know that this project is launching. And it's a project, as you know, that is aiming to build a sense of inclusion and belonging in Albany. I think we all know that, like all American cities and towns, sometimes we have failed in our ideals, to meet our ideals of making sure that everybody feels included and a sense of belonging regardless of their race, religion, socioeconomic status, gender identity, and so on. And so we're hoping through arts activities to build conversations. And this coming Sunday at the community center, we'll be gathering to make artist books, which are kind of 3D collages. They're great conversation pieces, and I invite you all to come. You don't have to be an artist or a writer, although I'm sure there's a lot of creativity among you all. And I'd like to invite anyone who would like to come to the second session, which is October 27th, when the people who participate in the workshop will be sharing their books and what they learned about the theme of home and hometown, which is the theme of this first event. It will be a really interesting conversation and will shape the rest of the year of activities. So we will also be having a poster contest, and we will be concluding with projections on the pillars of the BART tracks. We called it Path to Belonging because that path is a path that connects us to other communities in the East Bay. And I'm hoping that this project will help us feel a sense of connection to other communities and to build a sense of belonging both within Albany and within the East Bay. So I just want to warmly invite you all. Hope to see you throughout our conversations this year. And thanks for your support, and thanks also to city staff who have been very helpful in getting this project rolling. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Yes, hello, I'm David Danby, a resident of Albany. I hope you can hear me okay. Regarding Measure R, the yard signs that have been posted around Albany stating, vote no, Measure R, vote no on rent increases, are misleading or actually a lie. The implication in these signs is that a yes vote on Measure R is a yes vote on rent increases. Nowhere in Measure R does it mention rent increases. Only landlords can increase rents. Measure R does not. Landlords, how about being clear about this on those signs? Thank you.
Hi again. I also am concerned. I want to thank Bob Otis for his comments. I'm also concerned about the misinformation being disseminated about Measure R. I'm particularly concerned about the tenants who have been led to think that by voting yes on Measure R, which has been created to protect them, that their rents will automatically go up. That is, they think a vote for Measure R is a vote for rent increases, when in fact, in actual fact, as written in the measure, there is nothing about rent increases. Instead, it provides funds for them. It provides a program for regular review of their rentals to make sure they're in compliance. It provides legal services for landlords and tenants. Saying that Measure R will increase rents is not true. Only landlords can increase rent. The landlords have a strong presence and are, as Bob pointed out, they have a lot of funds that are helping them with that strong presence. And they're spending a lot of money to prevent this measure from passing. I would like to see the city post the summary from the city attorney and stress that raising rents is not included in Measure R. The landlords claiming that is like a abusive domestic partner claiming that they wouldn't have to hit their partner if only they behaved. If rents go up, it is because the landlords raised them. It is not, I emphasize, not in Measure R. Of course, in Albany, landlords can raise rent as they wish because we do not have rent control and we have rent review, which has absolutely no teeth. So they can raise them as they wish, and they have been doing that more than the cost of living. The dishonesty from the landlords is not only wrong, it is sad to see this kind of behavior from people who call themselves progressive. There is nothing progressive about preventing tenants from having this kind of support. The scare techniques that are being used remind me of a certain candidate running for president. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
I wanted to thank the members of the Civil Grand Jury Association for coming, very much so. And if I may ask a question of you, and if you come to the podium so others could hear. I'm just curious if the association or the report, which I apologize I haven't read, has any recommendations on how state law could change to solve what is perhaps rightly perceived as a fundamental conflict of interest. I have some thoughts, but I'm curious.
Yes, it's kind of a complicated answer. The state law doesn't address it at all. It's up to the local jurisdiction. There is I think it's a 10-day appeal period where someone could file a writ to contest the language, but it's rarely done, and it makes it extremely difficult. We're working in the situation of there not being any regulations from the state. We'd certainly welcome that happening. In fact, State Senator Glazier's office actually did work with one of our members on trying to draft some language, but he's termed out and said it would not get introduced this year. But so absent any state direction, all there is exposure of misleading language, which we're trying to get more publicity from the press, but we only get an occasional mention. East Bay Times has done a few things on it. Dan Borenstein, if you know him. Is that?
Just looking for information.
All right. We are dangerously entering the territory of having a discussion about a non-agendized item. Apologies.
I think it answered the question, if I'm not correct, so I think we should be done with public comment.
And I'll just offer if you could email citycouncil@albanyca.org, then it will come direct to us. Yeah, that'll get to all of us. That gets to all of us. And I want to thank the city attorney for exceeding the average yet again. That's certainly been my experience since I've been here for 4 years, so thank you very much.
Not seeing any other comments from council, we'll move on to item 7, consent calendar. On the consent calendar, items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, the staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the City Council. There will be no separate discussion on items unless a council member or a member of the audience requests removal of the item from the consent calendar. Looking to council if there's any items that you'd like to discuss or pull. Not seeing any from council. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on or discuss an item? Not seeing any members of the public asking for something to be pulled. I'll look to council for motion.
Move consent?
I'll second.
Vice Mayor Lopez,
Yep.
Mayor Mickey,
Yes.
Councilmember Hanson Romero,
Yes.
Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
and Councilmember Tiedemann.
Yes.
Motion carries.
I'm going to apologize. I will just say one thing on 7.7. I would like to thank staff for all the work that they're doing to continue to find solutions to implement electric tools in the Public Works Department. Sorry, I meant to talk about that earlier.
Here. If I could thank Councilmember Tiedemann for bringing a potential appointee to the Housing Advisory Commission to us, particularly a tenant appointee.
We'll move on to, thank you, Councilmember Jordan. Moving on to item 8, presentations. 8.1, Watershed Management Plan update.
Right. Thank you. Good evening, Council. Thank you for the opportunity for us to speak here on our project. My name is David Lamb. I'm Associate Engineer in the Department of Public Works, and I'm serving as the project manager leading the effort for our Watershed Management Plan. And tonight I'm joined by Cheng Su and Camilla Correa of Wood Rogers. They are our consultants who are working as the project managers on the Wood Rogers side for this update. And I just want to say a couple of words to provide some context about this effort and what we're trying to accomplish. So a watershed management plan is really a guiding document. It's a tool for the city to use to inform its decision-making about its storm drains, assets, and its waterways. If you go to the next slide, Anne. The watershed management plan has several purposes, but some of them include providing the city with an updated inventory of its storm drain assets. And this isn't just limited to what we have and where they're located, but we also look into the condition that they're in, as well as whether they're able to properly achieve their function in draining the city. We also look at our current maintenance practices and see if there are opportunities to improve upon them so that we can those assets can function for the remainder of their service life. And we take this information and we develop a list of improvement projects. And we don't just look at a list of projects, but we also want to develop a framework for how we prioritize these projects so that we can best use the city's limited resources to achieve the most benefit. And the details of that, Wood Rogers will get into later on in the presentation. And one of our long-term goals is not just to look at our storm drain assets, the structural piece, but also look at the overall health of our watersheds. So looking at opportunities to, at watershed restoration, at water quality improvements, reducing runoff, and looking at opportunities where we can install green infrastructure around the city. And finally, an important piece, of course, is taking a look at our needs from a funding perspective, and also looking for opportunities where we can apply for grants to help offset some of those costs. So the city last prepared its watershed management plan in 1998, and as you can imagine, a lot has changed over that time, both in terms of condition of the assets around the city, as well as configurations. And so we want to leverage Wood Rogers' experience and their expertise in creating an updated plan that we can use. And Wood Rogers has been helping other cities, neighboring cities in the area, in Oakland and Berkeley, update their similar watershed management plans. But we also recognize that each city has their own specific needs that they need to address. And so that's where we built into this project public outreach, that we can reach out to council and the public, residents, and other stakeholders within the city, so that we can gather that input and incorporate that valuable input into this effort. And that's why we're here tonight. First, to provide an informational update about the details about the Watershed Management Plan, as well as get some input from council about what you would like to see incorporated into that. So from here, I'll hand it off to Cheng, who will go through the rest of the slides.
Good evening. Again, I'm Cheng Su. Thanks for the opportunity. I've been in this industry for about 25 years, mostly serving the Bay Area agency, providing very similar and, of course, unique to the city in a way that the drainage master plan. So I'd like to talk about our approach a little bit, and as well getting you guys' input. One of the ways we've been doing it is make sure that master plan is implementable in the sense that you can just get the project out the door, get a funder, get a constructor, get it maintained. And in the sense that reliable, in the sense that your structure, your project that we recommend is optimized. There won't be any waste of public fund. And we talked about, David talked about, we're working with Oakland, City of Berkeley right now for the similar drainage master plan. So we're looking for opportunity to do the data sharing, cost sharing, so there won't be like waste of public fund as well. And we want to expand on the previous master plan or the watershed management plan to do a condition assessment, include the newer climate change guidance, and look at potential risks and potential guidance when moving forward, as well as looking for opportunity to update the regulatory requirement, for example, for the water quality perspective, from a FEMA perspective. And lastly, we'll look into detail of financial analysis, look at ways that we can fund those projects. Next, please. This slide going to show the approximate schedule for this project, and as you can see, the star is the location or timeline that we will have a public meeting to solicit input, as well as giving an update for both the council and the public. Next, please. With that, I would like to pass it to my coworker, Camilla, to talk about the detail of the master plan.
Good evening, Council. My name is Camila. I'm the Deputy Project Manager for this project. And here today I'll be talking about the scope of the project. Let's start with the data collection. Next slide, please. So the data collection is the first phase of the project. In this phase, we are working on developing a comprehensive GIS database that houses all of the storm drainage facility network, georeference plans, the condition assessment, as well as historical information. The historical information includes photos, reports from previous flooding within the city, as well as work orders. During this phase, we will also be installing 3 flow gauges across the city watershed to collect data through the next winter. The goal of this phase is to incorporate all of the available data into a single repository that can easily be accessed, managed, and updated by the city. Next slide. Part of this data collection will be collecting all of the as-built and plans from previous projects that have been implemented across the city. These plans will be georeferenced, so that means we'll be assigning spatial coordinates to those plans so that we can overlay them with aerial imagery, streets, the storm drain network, and use the data within those plans to update the database. So we can confirm data like the alignment, geometry, the data was built, so we make sure that our database contains the most accurate information and the most up-to-date information. Another component of the data collection will be the CCTV. The city carried out a pretty extensive CCTV program in 2015, and we have collected those records, the photos, the videos from that program, and we will be using all of that information to inform a rehabilitation plan for deficient pipes. Next slide. Another important component of the data collection is receiving the input from the community. So people who live here, who work here, have had firsthand experience in the flooding incidents that are observed across the city. We have collected and organized the work orders from previous years, plotted them on a map, and categorized them into capacity, maintenance, or structurally related issues. Having them on a map like this helps us identify certain patterns of locations that have repeat incidents that we can prepare for in the future. We will continue to gather information from the community and from the city through the website and through engagement meetings. The data that we'll receive will likely vary in severity. Some of it may be shallow nuisance flooding. Some of it may be severe flooding that may pose a risk to public safety or cause property damage. But all of this data will be collected and will inform our study and help us validate our results. Previous slide, please. So this slide shows an example of one of work order that was collected in 2021. This location shows some moderate flooding, likely because of some debris or leaves that were collected in the storm drain and didn't allow it to drain properly. This location was categorized as a maintenance issue, but through our study, we will be able to confirm if there maybe is also a capacity issue nearby that is not allowing the pipe to drain, or maybe a structural issue, maybe a pipe is cracked or collapsed. So all of this data will be integrated into a single database. Next slide. Next slide, please. Another component of our study is the condition assessment. So as I mentioned, we have the CCTV reports from the city previous study. We will review all of this and develop a maintenance, rehab, and replacement plan. The output of this plan will be the map like shown on this slide, where we have the location of the deficient pipes, the extent of the proposed improvements, different maintenance activities shown in different colors. We have photos to justify the deficiency and serve as proof of the deficiency. We have a detailed cost table, and this whole plan is easily implemented by the O&M, the city's O&M group. Slide. Next slide. Could you play the video, please? Oh, it's a PDF. Okay. Okay, you can imagine it's flooding. So another component of our study will be the capacity assessment. For this task, we will be building a hydrologic and hydraulic model that integrates one-dimensional and two-dimensional model. In this model, we can model the interaction between the storm drain network, open channels, detention basins, and the overland floodplain. This type of model allows us to assess the storm drainage capacity and also the extent of flooding in different frequency storms. So we can see the extent of flooding in a 3-year storm, which properties are impacted in a 10-year storm, 100-year storm. Next slide. But how do we know that our model is accurate? How do we know it's representing what is actually out there? So as I mentioned, we are planning to install 3 flow gauges across the city, and the data collected in those gauges, along with local rain data, will be used to calibrate our model. This exercise gives us and the city confidence that this model is accurate and will be useful to identify deficiencies and to propose improvements. Next slide. Yes, thank you. Another component that we'll be looking at is green infrastructure. This is often a feature that is overlooked in these type of studies, but we think it's important to focus on them because they can have a significant impact on the system performance. For example, a typical CIP project may be upsizing or replacing a pipe underground, but we can also look at an alternative where we propose a detention basin that stores water in the peak of the storm. It can have water quality benefits, and it can also be a recreational space in the dry season. So these type of projects provide multiple benefits to the community. And these projects will be the ones that we look at when we start developing our capital improvement project plan. Next slide. Another component that we'll be looking at is climate change. For this task, we'll be partnering with Pathways to analyze different climate projections and evaluate how these can impact the city. We'll be looking at rising sea levels and increases in precipitation intensity in phase 1 and increases in groundwater levels in phase 2. We will incorporate these extreme events in precipitation and tidal levels and see how the city system will perform in these extreme events. We'll also look at how these extreme events will impact our proposed improvements and look for opportunities to optimize that. Thank you. Once we have our deficiencies from the capacity standpoint and we have our deficiencies from the condition standpoint, we will develop a capital improvement project plan. The plan will incorporate a risk-based priority system where we take the likelihood of a storm based on the storm frequency, and we calculate the consequence. For the consequence, we use a FEMA tool called HAZIS that incorporates data like property damage, population density, business interruption to calculate a comprehensive look at the impact that a storm event can have. This FEMA HAZIS tool is also the basis for grant applications, so this can also be used in the future to apply for funding. So now, first that we have the likelihood and we have the consequence, we can compute the risk. Then this risk can be compared to the life cycle costs of the project. This value is what will allow us to rank projects based on which ones provide the most benefit to the city. Next slide, please. But it's not all about risk and about money, so we need to take other factors into consideration. We will be working closely with the city and with the community to incorporate other factors into our priority system. We will look at health and safety, recreation, social equity, environmental benefits, constructability, and funding availability to create a comprehensive capital improvement plan. And with that, I'll pass it back to Jane.
Thanks, Camilla. So once we have all the project developed, optimized, and ranked, what should we do next? Of course, we're going to get the fund understanding what we need. Next, please. So to understand the cost required for the city, we'll have to look at from the CIP capital improvement project standpoint, how much we need to pay for those projects. We'll look at your operation and maintenance standpoint, how much it's going to take you to continuing maintain your facility, as well as the component for water quality as well. And all those combined, we'll have to compare against your existing revenue and see what's the additional funding need and how should we get there. So pretty much that's the nutshell for the financial analysis. Next, please. So, and more importantly, it's the public outreach. Next. So all those won't be successful project unless we get the community, we get the city to buy in, to understand the purpose of the whole project. So we will work with the public work through a website, flyer, community council meetings to communicate the status of the project with the public, as well as solicit input along the process. Next, please. With that, in a similar mindset, our report will include the summary map that's implementable. You may find the term, kind of repeating the term in the sense that we have a summary map that a graphical and a summarized for the upper management to take it to the next level to get the funding, as well have a map or a report that is justifiable to explain on one piece of map to the public and to the councilor why we need a project. So it's easy to digest. And I might have explained the graphical component as well. It's very easy to communicate this with public and as well for technical people as well. With that, I would like to conclude the presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm looking to council for any questions.
It's not going to surprise you that I have a lot of questions on this one. Thank you very much for your work. It's interesting times to be a hydraulic engineer, for sure, which can be good or bad, but least interesting. You mentioned green infrastructure. So obviously the climate is changing and the system is changing because green infrastructure is being sort of added all the time. And so if and how will the modeling take into account how green infrastructure rolls out through time under the Regional Water Quality Control Board orders? In other words, there will be new features added, like they get added with pavement projects typically. And so there'll be new features that are rolled out across the city with time.
If I understand the question correctly, you're asking how we account or model or simulate those features. Is that correct? Okay. So this is drainage master plan. So we focus on multi-benefit. So we don't look at water quality enhancement by looking at reduction of the pollutant, but we provide a framework or space for the water quality feature. For example, once we identify a detention basin, that detention basin will allocate enough space for water quality treatment media. At the same time, we will add the flood control peak flow mitigation component on top. So those will be integrated that can be developed as a framework for the water quality project.
I guess maybe to give an example, there was a feature that was built on the north side of Marin underneath the BART tracks. And my understanding of those features is they modify the hydrograph of runoff that will then go into the drainage system. And so the more of those features that get added, the more the hydrograph is going to change, which then impacts the capacity calculations. And so not looking at the water quality side, just looking at the hydrograph side.
Understand.
How will those be addressed, given that the system is evolving under our feet and over our heads both at the same time?
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood
That's okay,
your
no
question.
problem.
Yeah,
they do both, so it's understandable.
So we do have features to incorporate into the modeling that account for the flow reduction, which is the hydrograph reduction you just mentioned. So there are a couple features. We look at the system-wide green infrastructure like bioretention, the green infrastructure, pervious pavement, all this feature. Collectively, we look at how those impact or reduce your total runoff for entire city network. Mm-hmm. There are also regional drainage facility or regional bioretention that have a bigger impact to the peak flow reduction, and those will be modeled as well as part of the hydraulic model.
Thank you, and maybe that's a question for staff as well, to give the scenario of what might happen with green infrastructure.
Yeah, I'll add that as part of our requirements for our municipal stormwater permit, we are required to keep an updated inventory of the existing installed green infrastructure. And that exists in GIS spatial data, and that's going to be incorporated in the hydraulic modeling that Chang is proposing. As that list of green infrastructure evolves and is updated, I think we'll see that it gets incorporated into the hydraulic modeling in future updates of the Watershed Management Plan. We don't see this document as a snapshot in time of when we complete it and then we set it aside and use that forever, but it is going to be an ever-living document that's going to evolve as conditions evolve, including when new green infrastructure gets constructed.
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess I'm hearing maybe it's going to be a living model because it's been, I guess, 26 years since the last one. If there isn't a scenario for how green infrastructure is going to be rolled out or integrated into this, then it's going to become potentially stale in 20 years.
Right, it is our intention to keep this updated, and we can use the same modeling system as we continue to move forward with future updates of this plan.
Great, thanks. I'll keep going unless you tell me when to stop. And give somebody else a chance.
I have a guess on my right, and on my left there might be some questions.
This is probably one of my most favorite presentations I've gotten a chance to see while sitting on council. Full disclosure, I'm a water nerd. That's my background. My master's was in water resources engineering, and some of the modeling work, very similar that I've done while I've worked with the Berkeley Lab for about 10 years. Excuse me. Thank you, Preston, for diving into questions around modeling. And my question for you, and this isn't to like grill anyone, just if anyone who just happened to listen is like really curious about different applications of hydraulic modeling. I had a different question ready, but you had answered it very clearly during your presentation, what type of modeling was being conducted, 1 and 2D modeling. I guess my question then now is, why limit it to 1 or 2D modeling, or can you explain why it'd be more beneficial, advantageous, or more efficient not to maybe do any physical or composite modeling or 3D modeling for a project like this?
Yes. 3D modeling, for example, Delft 3D, that simulate the entire bay, SF Bay, with the 3D component, which means the movement of water horizontally, also vertically. So for shallow water, typically for master plan, we don't deal with the 3D component in general because the velocity don't change across the depth of the water for shallow water. That's the reason typically 3D is not the typical software technology used for drainage master plan. Indeed, 1 and 2D combined detail modeling is so-called more like recent advanced technology to use for master plan. Because a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but there are some agencies still use a 1D component which doesn't account for the 2D surface routing. So when the flow get out of the pipe, flood the street, they will say, okay, let's improve the pipe. But that's not the optimized way to spend the public fund, because you might go to the gutter and just spread 2 inches away from the gutter flow line. Why improve the pipes? So we look into that level of detail. Hope to answer your question.
No, definitely does. Thank you. And I'm sure folks in the audience that love water appreciate the clarification too. My other follow-up question, and Preston, feel free to tag team once I'm done with this question, and maybe this is a question more so for city staff, but do we have any information or tracking on long-term status of completed work orders and service requests? Meaning, do we have an understanding of respective consequences and impacts on the system locally and as a whole after service requests have been conducted?
We do have a system where we track work orders as they're completed. And I don't have the statistics of the number that are completed off the top of my head, but we do track that within Public Works when they're received. We have not looked at long-term or repeat issues, and I think that's part of what this Watershed Management Plan update is going to help us do, is look at where we see trends, where we see deficiencies, and see if there is a deeper fix that we can implement to take care of the issue so that we no longer see the continued issues come up again and again.
Thank you. And I got one more last question from me, and then Preston, you can run the marathon on this one. In terms of data collection, because I think many of us who work in the scope of like research and with data in general, we understand and we know that our output is as good as our input. So I understand we're clearly working with a vast array of different technical data here. And I know that, you know, in the presentation it mentioned around incorporating some sense of like social accountability. I'm curious if, is it possible, or is it within reach or feasible to integrate social data from the standpoint of like community input data? I know that that would be a heavy lift and maybe beyond the current scope, but would that be something that could be applied in the future?
If I may try and understand the question, for the social data, are you referring to more like the social equity standpoint or more like the social input?
both social input and social equity. I did catch the social equity part, working on being accounted for, but I think sometimes, and this is just my personal perception experience, sometimes when we rely solely on that technical data being our input, we lose a lot in the system or in that machine when we get our output. And so I'm curious if that has been accounted for, or if it's just like, okay, we're going to acknowledge we can't account for that type of data, that type of social data, and we're going to move forward.
So from the social equity standpoint, we typically start from the census data and as the way to look for your disadvantaged community from census data. Then we rely heavily on the city or the community to more assign ranking to each component to let the public tell us which component's more important for the city of Albany. That's the reason that David was mentioning, that that's unique for the city. It's not like one size fit all. So we cannot apply what we develop for Oakland for the city of Albany. Is all different. And kind of back to the data collection from a technical perspective, you're correct that garbage in, garbage out. A lot of technical data is hard to get, and we're kind of lucky enough that, and the city public work made a good choice that we working with multiple agencies surrounding you guys. We've been collecting a lot of technical information that can be used for the city of Albany.
Thank you.
Can I add that? So we'll be collecting all of the technical information of the storm drain network. But as I mentioned, we're also interested in collecting data from the residents, from the community, so we can use that to validate our model as well.
I guess full disclosure, so I'm also, Robin and I, or Vice Mayor Lopez and I, met in the hydrogeology department at Lawrence Berkeley Lab, so this might be a rather unique city council that you're engaging with in that regard. Thank you for the questions, Vice Mayor. Brought to mind to ask, what is the coverage of University Village in this? I mean, my understanding is the storm drain system in University Village is owned by UC. It's private property. Obviously has interfaces on either side and is one of the, I think it's one of the lowest, if not the lowest lying neighborhood in Albany with regard to climate change and whatnot. I'd be curious to hear you staff talk about how University Village will be incorporated or not into the modeling.
It's a pretty small system, and it does interact with the city system, so it will be included.
Okay, great. Thank you. What future precipitation model or forecast will be used for this, since we no longer have statistical stationarity, which is just a fancy way of saying history is not the guide to the future anymore?
Right. Climate change is a science evolving, and it's also a projection. So the consultant we team at Climate Pathway, they're team with a National Lawrence Lab in Livermore to develop a newest guidance for the increased precip. So there are historically a lot of consultants use that called scale down model, which is applying a constant adjustment for the entire design storm, which a Pathway or sub-consultant kind of adjust the intensity per the duration. So towards the middle of the storm, they have different adjustment versus the outer of the storm pattern.
And will there be any sensitivity study performed around that future projection, since, again, it's going to be less accurate than the climate we had and the stability of the climate we had in the past?
It's still a projection, so we can do the best sensitivity analysis, but it's still a projection. So what we will recommend instead is we look at your existing problem, fixing your existing problem, add a component of the climate change on top of your existing problem. So instead of using the future projection to identify all issues that you have to fix while you don't have fund to fix the existing problem, that's our general approach.
Thank you. I think on the 1D, 2D question, I wonder if the modeling you're doing is what I've heard called 2.5D. So it's mathematically 2D, but it's geometrically taking into account the surface relief.
Yes.
The city? Okay. And how detailed is it? I mean, does it have like curb heights, the gutter depth in terms of street capacity?
Yeah, generally it captures the street crown and the gutter.
Oh, great.
So it's pretty detailed.
Wow, okay. Was hoping but not expecting, so that's great, thanks. Does the model take into account infiltration, groundwater infiltration into the system?
It does in the hydrology
Okay.
component, not in the hydraulic.
The hydraulic capacity of the, so does it include a groundwater model, or how is that part done? How is that forecast?
Yeah, it does include a groundwater component. So the calibration part of it will include a groundwater component. So the access or the rainfall, put it that way, the infiltration from the rainfall into the ground, into the soil, will trickle down to the groundwater component. In our calibration process, we'll simulate the groundwater in the sense the infiltration or INI to go in the pipe or channel. So we reflect back to the system.
Okay, great. And where will the 3 gauges be installed if that's been selected? Maybe that's in the works.
It's in the works.
Okay, fair enough. And on the map, what defines an open channel? I noticed like some streets have a blue dashed line saying this is an open channel and some streets don't. And to me, they're all an open channel essentially since they all carry runoff. So is there some technical difference between them, or?
So do you mean open channel versus street gutter?
I guess, yeah. So if I don't know, well, if you look at the map, there's some streets that have this blue dashed line and the legend says open channel. And to me, it just looks like the gutter, and then other streets don't. So I don't know if there's like some capacity difference or some technical definition of the difference.
Probably a capacity difference.
Okay.
Yeah, in general, open channel, the way we define it is based on the size, the vidage, like your backyard dish, your cornices, and what's the other great wall?
Cerrito.
El Cerrito.
Cerrito, yeah.
Those are considered open channels.
Right, well, to give an example, so there's a segment of Washington Avenue that has it's shown with an open channel.
It may be a ditch, more of a ditch instead of just a street gutter.
I'll add that I think part of this effort is also going to be putting down some more ironclad criteria about how we're defining some of these assets that we have so that we can better provide accurate maps that are available. And this is going to be part of that discussion that we're going to be working on.
Great, thanks. That's the end of my lightning round. Very well done. Much appreciated.
Looking at the council members, any other questions, Vice Mayor? It is your floor if you have questions. Okay. I do not have questions. I do have a lot of comments that I'll raise later, but with that, we can open it up for public comment. Anyone in the room, audience?
Hi, my name's Nick Medeiros, and I had just 2 follow-ons on some of the questions that Council Member Lopez and Council Member Jordan brought up. One relates to the concept of ecological value. The words health and restoration and water quality runoff and green infrastructure were used. So I'm wondering how those things might be measured. If there's, for instance, biodiversity barometer or any particular water quality sensors that might be used. And the second question I had is regarding the Marin system. It's basically fed from Kensington and Berkeley, so wondering if there's a flow meter or prior knowledge of the input to that system, which is maybe beyond the scope of our city, but could be the determining variable in whether our system works. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so 2-part question, and how does benefit of those project be measured? So I would say from a flood control perspective, the calibration will kind of confirm the measured benefit of a flow reduction. So with the calibrated model, you can quantify the amount of flow reduction. Typically, it's pretty accurate using the calibrated model to assess the flood reduction benefit. From water quality standpoint, it's a bit beyond the extent of scope of this project, but we provide a framework or a site or a storage available for water quality treatment. So we won't able to quantify it, but we set up a feasible location for water quality modeling in the future. In terms of the flow gauging coming from Berkeley, so we will have flow gauge installed just downstream of the Berkeley system, so, and as well as towards the bay side of the Albany system. So you will have gauges to quantify what's flow coming into the city and as well as leaving the city as well.
Thank you. Do you have all any comments? Okay.
Go ahead, Eileen.
Oh, hello. This is Eileen Sheehan. I'm a resident of Albany. Thank you for this presentation. I just want to confirm a couple of things. Under the scope of this work, is the city assessing the condition of the culverts themselves or focusing primarily on the water quality? That's one question. It would be very helpful to know because a number of homes in Albany have culverts running under the properties, and based on some information at least that I had, the condition of those culverts has deteriorated, and it would be useful to assess the structural integrity of those culverts. So it would be helpful to know if that's going to be addressed. And I also heard a question raised about the location of the flow gauges that you mentioned there would be 3. I think that's too few. First of all, we have 5 creeks in Albany, some of them underground, and some of them culverted, some not. I think if we're going to have a watershed management plan, it's extremely important to have good, reliable data, and 3 flow gauges does not seem to be enough, given the number of streams we have. But it would be helpful to hear you clarify how you will select those the locations. And I want to make sure I understand too exactly, is it just measuring the flow and quantity seasonally, or are you also looking at, it sounded like you might not be looking at water quality and sedimentation, but I wasn't quite sure about that. So just overall, and then lastly, I'd just like to say, I hope an outcome for this project is a really good and accurate map. Right now, I don't see the map that I saw, the one we have that was shared in the PowerPoint. It's missing a lot of key points, such as access points. And I see that you're basing some of your data on work orders, but there's a lot that's happening underground that may not be the problem. The work orders may not accurately reflect the problems elsewhere in the system. They may just reflect the problems of poor street sweeping, which happens all the time. But so that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Forgive my short-term memory, but I'll try my best to answer all of them. So from a condition standpoint, inspection standpoint, so the city have done pretty comprehensive CCTV investigation for a good part of the city. So we'll be relying on a lot of those report and information to assess the condition of the facility around the city. Also, the city will have availability to inspect additional facility if needed. In terms of sedimentation, yes, through the CCTV video and the report, we will able to assess the sedimentation. So typically the condition inspection includes sedimentation, structural integrity, and trash and all the other issue, root intrusion or other kind of issue. Let me remember this. Flow gauges, right? So you're asking if 3 is sufficient. So we actually have 4 because we are working with the City of Berkeley. So City of Berkeley will install, well, actually they have a 1 gauge at the Coordinates Creek, and then they will install a couple as well. So we'll be leveraging all those data to use for City of Albany. So in terms of comprehensiveness, like, is that sufficient? The 4 or 5, is that sufficient? I would say yes, in the sense that there are a lot of technical information that's repeatable, reproducible, because based on our experience, we have collected a lot of similar data throughout all the Bay Area agencies. When we see a lot of repeating pattern for certain system and certain land use, certain watersheds, that's why we picked that 3 location we picked, suggested for the City of Albany.
Not seeing any other public comment. I'll bring it back to council for any discussion.
Okay, I will proceed. So I guess following up on the last commenter and your response, thank you for that. Are there plans to video inspect any portions of the subsurface system for which recent data doesn't exist, such that there's 100% coverage for the development of this plan, or maybe there is already 100% coverage?
I think we would try to prioritize getting condition assessments from the portions of the storm drain system that we don't have any data. That way, we get a more complete picture of what we're dealing with. I think one of the reasons that we might not have data is if there was a change in the system since 2015, then we would not have captured any information from it because it wouldn't have been captured as part of that effort. So we would try to get a more complete picture of what we're dealing with citywide.
I think I'm hearing there was a complete inspection done in 2015. Is that correct, or?
Yes. I don't know if there was if that was put into GIS yet, but it was fairly comprehensive citywide coverage.
Okay, great, thanks. The city, which you may have already been informed by staff, at some point is planning to reroute the Middle Creek, the culvert that carries Middle Creek between San Pablo and Adams. I raised at the time of the design of that this concern about change in precipitation patterns due to climate change, and I may not have understood the answer, but I think the answer was that it's been designed based on stationarity. So I hope that you'll revisit that, because we have to start, upsizing the system at some point to deal with what's coming. I would be interested in the plan including a policy against lining storm drain treatment on the swales and basins. So, I've encountered a number of basins that are engineered with liners and have asked if those could be removed, and the geotechnical engineer has, in one case, looked at it and said, yeah, that's fine. But I'm not going to be here to do that, and my interest is those can both recharge groundwater and then they can also relieve groundwater. Basically, if you let that flow go both ways, you've got a subdrain there, so it provides a control on how high groundwater can come, and it also recharges groundwater when groundwater is low. Now, depending on the soils, that may be minor. In Albany, some places they're really very low, but in some places it's actually pretty high, feet per day of infiltration. So I'd be interested in exploration of that policy. There's I've long wanted or been interested in the possibility of daylighting Cerrito Creek to the east of the Greenway between Cougar Field and the asphalt area next to the middle school. I think that's maybe the next best opportunity for daylighting. So to the extent this plan could shed any light, any water on that, that would be great. And In going door to door in years past, I encountered multiple households whose residents told me in a particular area that they had overflow from the street through their properties regularly. And interestingly, I don't see a work order for that location on the map. Maybe that means it's taken care of in the last years, which would be great. But I'll just give you the location since we're here now. It's south of Peralta on the west side of, south of Sonoma on the west side of Peralta, which is a low point. And they said basically there was like a flash flood that comes down Sonoma Hill and turns the corner and hits their properties. And there is a drain inlet there, but they said it just gets completely overwhelmed. And then finally, the representation of the culverts on the map. Being a geologist, I'm like map symbol focused. I think it's kind of confusing because they block out content that's underneath. And so it's confusing with the legends. So it might be that you could use a symbology where you put a line, show the culverts as a line on either side of the line that's underneath. I think the line underneath is showing which jurisdiction, which agency is responsible for that drainage, and the culvert symbols are basically blocking that out. So that is that's what I have.
Vice Mayor, any comments? So I'll have the final comments then. I'll just say that you had me at GIS and comprehensive collection of past and current data. I am not a geologist or a hydrologist or any of what they are, but I do love GIS. And the 1D, 2D, 2.5D, 3D conversation was just the cherry on top for all of that. But I really actually am super excited about this project. It is one of those projects that might seem very, for some, might seem very mundane and just kind of, why isn't the city, it's something the city has to do and they always do. But I think the number of cities I've worked in where there's this data that's just hidden away in a printed report somewhere, and the ability to get it all into GIS is so powerful and so helpful for us as such a small community. And while I'm not particularly thinking about it from a stormwater management side or the water side, I am thinking of it from my love of streets and how the data that you collect and the opportunities that you might be identifying can help inform the active transportation plan, where often we're thinking about how can we find ways of calming streets, and maybe we can do green infrastructure and calm streets at the same time. You mentioned the possibility of basins, detention basins. I'm really intrigued where in Albany we could get detention basins. Not sure I can imagine one right now, but I think the importance there is knowing that we are a city with such limited land, the ability to have it both be a detention basin and active recreation in the vast majority of the year when we're dry. So I'm very excited about that. The other thing that I'm interested to see is as you do your report and as you get to hard numbers, right, what are the fiscal impacts, CIP impacts? Then it goes into the other geeky part of my life around zoning and building standards, and the question of if we expect there to be more rain, should we be asking more of new development in terms of detaining water on site? Not through detention ponds, but through underground cisterns, through other means, just to moderate some of that water impact on our systems. And so I'm hoping that your study will help us understand if it's a $10 billion worth of work, is that something, if we were to implement building code changes or things, what kind of savings could we expect? Because suddenly we wouldn't have as much of an impact on our system. So I am looking forward to this project. With that, thank you so much for coming tonight. Wonderful presentation.
You reminded me of something else. Your comments, if I may.
I'm going to remember not to comment, actually.
What? So along the lines of detention basins and lengthening the hydrograph or actually eliminating it in favor of groundwater recharge. So maybe it won't surprise you, I have a recharge basin that I built in our yard. And a local group that I will not name said, hey, could you put up together a one-pager on this so we could tell everybody how to do it? I was like, no, I'm not going to do that because the systemic effects of recharging that much water, could be different than what I do. Where we happen to live, which is in the flats, basically we have soil that can infiltrate about a foot a day, which is quite a bit compared to a block away. You can have a puddle that'll sit there for a week. And I know Albany has a requirement now I'm not mistaken, that on remodels, the roof drainage is to come to the street better. Am I understanding that correct? I'm seeing nods, yes. And so I'm interested in the exploration of this, groundwater, surface water nexus, obviously, and sort of whatever extent it could be explored in places that are appropriate, other places that are appropriate, where more on-site infiltration, just straight infiltration of surface runoff would be appropriate. What would be the consequence of that? That might be a scope extension, I would imagine, given how this is laid out, but I am interested in that question, because that could go a long ways to making a better hydrologic cycle in the city, which has all sorts of benefits in terms of reducing irrigation water. I mean, we haven't irrigated our yard in, 10 years, because we infiltrate so much water during the year. So we don't have a lawn, of course, but
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. Thank you for presenting tonight. Thank you, staff, for bringing this to us. And I do look forward to seeing the results of the study.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to item 8-2, City of Albany Emergency Operations Plan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Jim Boydo, Fire Chief for the Albany Fire Department. Tonight, we're here to present our updated Emergency Operations Plan for your adoption. This has been about a year process with our core planning team, which involved every department heads and members of all the departments within the city. And then there was a collaborative team which engaged our regional and statewide partners to review our plan so that they could see it and give us feedback. Finally, that feedback was brought back to the core group who drafted this final plan. With me was the project lead, Captain Tim Smizer. He manages our community preparedness and resiliency programs out of the fire department. And Paul Bockrath, he's our subject matter expert from Preparative Consulting. Paul has decades of experience as a emergency manager. He's a statewide recognized subject matter expert, so we were very lucky to be able to retain his services.
All right. Thank you, Chief. It's a pleasure to be here. Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. It's a privilege to be here this evening presenting the City of Albany Emergency Operations Plan to you and the community of Albany. It's been a real pleasure and honor to work with city staff and the community in developing this collaborative and comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. My name is Paul Bockrath. I'm with Preparative Consulting. We're an emergency management business. We work with cities, counties, special districts, and the state to develop emergency operations plans, local hazard mitigation plans, continuity of operations plans, and dam emergency and associated annexes. We also provide training statewide. We provide training to, again, those cities, counties, special districts, and the state. We provide training to the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services for the staff at the State Operations Center, and for the Department of Water Resources, their Flood Operations Center. So this is very interesting to listen to the hydrology discussions. I always enjoy that with that staff. We also design and deliver operational and discussion-based exercises and respond to real-world disasters. In those opportunities, we've had to work throughout the state with a number of state agencies and counties for disasters, and we've also had the pleasure of working with the City of Albany to provide training, exercises, and real-world response during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Emergency Operations Plan for the City of Albany is a multidiscipline all-hazards plan. It establishes a single and comprehensive framework for the management of extraordinary incidents, disasters, and emergencies, situations within and affecting the City of Albany. The plan provides the concepts, the process, the structures necessary to carry out assigned roles and functional responsibilities of city staff and agencies associated with that disaster, consistent with the standardized emergency management system, the incident command system, and the national incident management system. The plan was developed in accordance with best practices, and specifically with guidance from the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services Crosswalk, which will show, provides the content and structure of the plan, and the FEMA, or Federal Emergency Management Agency Comprehensive Preparedness Guide 101, next slide please, which provides the planning process and the public engagement of the whole community within this process. So we utilize those documents, and the planning team also utilized this crosswalk, the CPG 101, as an inclusive tool to ensure that we reach the whole community. The next slide, please. With that, the Emergency Operations Plan will allow the City of Albany to comply with Homeland Security Presidential Directive 5 and the California Government Code 8607E1, which mandates that government plan for, train in, exercise, and use the standardized emergency management system and the National Incident Management System in order to be eligible for federal reimbursement and state reimbursement of response-related costs. The Emergency Operation Plan not only complies with these mandates, but also incorporates, as you can see on the screen, the 2019 California State Auditor's recommendations for protecting California's most vulnerable residents from disasters. This complies with Government Code 8593.3 by including response actions for people with disabilities and access and functional needs in the areas of alert and warning, evacuation, and sheltering. And what we know from our experience in best practices, these individuals are the most vulnerable, and we want to make sure that we plan to ensure their safety during an emergency. Next slide, please. So as we look at the structure of the plan and our approach to this planning process, we began with defining the project and incorporating both a core and collaborative planning team, as Chief Boydo mentioned, and I'll get into the specifics of that. We looked at our threat and hazard assessment, including flooding, and we reviewed existing plans, policies, and procedures, and did a gap analysis understanding what of those agreements are currently in place and what are those things that we need to improve upon. Again, with the core and the collaborative planning team reaching out to the whole community, we developed a draft of the plan, and those engaged in the planning process reviewed that draft. And after we've refined that draft, we're presenting it to you here today. Next slide, please, Ann. So as we look at this long process, we wanted to ensure that we did engage as many response partners as possible, understanding what are those resources and capabilities that they can leverage during an emergency, and understand what is the community's needs so that we can take actions to meet their needs during an emergency. So looking at those steps, it was about a year-long process to work through that. And I will say that the city really engaged in this process and provided a lot of good feedback. So I want to thank them for that. Next slide, please. So as we began the process, the first step was to include these two core and collaborative planning teams. Next slide, please. The core team, as the chief mentioned, was a smaller group representing the city departments and those key stakeholders that we would use to carry out the plan, but also develop the plan. We asked them to help us develop the details of that response plan and then help physically draft that plan and review the plan. The next was the collaborative planning team, and that's where we cast a wide net into the community and looked at members of the whole community to engage those folks in the planning process to, again, understand what resources, capabilities they bring, but also do that gap analysis and understand what are their needs and then what other resources those people can bring to meet their own needs and work with government throughout an emergency. So as we looked at our response and recovery partners, we brought in technical and subject matter experts to do that and built a large collaborative team. Next slide, please. And with that team, you can see that that included the city departments, and they were really engaged in this process, and all of these departments, from the city manager, who was fantastic in providing leadership and guidance and feedback. Albany is one of our favorite cities to work with, and we've had a long-standing relationship with the city. So it makes it that much more pleasurable, and it gives us a better in-depth knowledge and understanding of the needs of the community by being engaged. So the police department, fire department, community development, finance, human resources, public works, recreation, and community service, all wonderful people and provided a lot to the plan. Next one, Ann. We also then cast a wide net to the collaborative planning team, and you can see all of those partners that we engaged here, and these were some of the key stakeholders that we engaged in this process, who provided their time and attention, again, identifying resources, capabilities, and needs. Next, please. And we just wanted to take a second and recognize some of those key stakeholders and thank them for their involvement and their time developing this plan. And next slide, please. So one of the things that we did is building on the state auditor's recommendations for vulnerable populations and Government Code 8593.3, mandating that local government and counties plan for and consider people with disabilities and access and functional needs in those areas of alert and warning, evacuation, and care and shelter. So what we did is we built working groups where we invited these people to bring their subject matter expertise to 1 to 2 hour meeting. We began by providing them questions ahead of time, then gathering that information and having those responses ready to go at those meetings so we weren't wasting time. They could come into those meetings having already built a framework, and then we can discuss that collaboration and those responses rather than trying to build them in a meeting. So that was very successful, and we were able to be very productive in that process as we work through these different working groups. Next slide, please. So then we built the Emergency Operations Plan, and I'll go through what that looks like for you now. The next slide. So it begins with some of the boilerplate stuff in government, the promulgation, the approval letter, which we seek this evening from this group. The table of contents outline it, which is very important because one of the things that I want to mention throughout this process is that this document, it's a large document, but it's intended to be used as a response guide or manual. This isn't a novel that you're going to curl up next to a fire and read cover to cover. You could, it might help you sleep, but it's very detailed and it's intended to be utilized as a resource. So whether you're dealing with an evacuation or you're dealing with sheltering or alert and warning, or you have a position within the Emergency Operations Center, you would look at that table of contents, find that area of information, and go to it. So you might say, well, who can activate the plan? You could look on the table, find that, flip to that page, and it will give you a detailed process for who can do it, how that's going to occur, and step by step. So it's a large document, but my experience in public safety for 36 years in emergency management, working all over this country and this state, we can't remember everything during a disaster. So to the extent we can think about those things as a group and have people remind us of what we need to do, build that common operating picture, and come up with the tasks and the items that we need to do, we can document that, memorialize it in the plan, and then when the emergency occurs, we can look and say, that's something I don't need to do, this is something I need to do, and work through the list. So it's a large plan. These are some of the areas that are the basics of the plan, the next slide. And this is where we get into the real meat of the plan, the concepts of operation, taking us through preparedness, response, recovery, mitigation, emergency operations. That's where it all comes together, how we activate, who activates, how we communicate, how we're organized. Continuity of government, that's something that is very important. How do we continue with government as we're running a disaster? I worked as a deputy police chief, and during my time, we had 2 members of our city council pass away within a short period of time. So we had to reconstitute government, and that was an interesting process that we went through. Promulgation for proclaiming the local emergency, and then incorporating the SEMS, ICS, and NIMS, mutual aid, recovery, and hazard mitigation. Next slide, please. So then we get into some of the specifics, those checklists that I mentioned. If you're serving in a position within the Emergency Operations Center, there's a detailed checklist that walks you through that process. One of the things that I've learned in responding to disasters across the state is that we can take anybody, because the group of people within this city, within this council, are intelligent people, as you demonstrated today in your questions, capable of making good decisions. I just need to share with you, what is your role, what is your responsibility, what do we need from you during a disaster, and then have you carry out that, and that's what those checklists hope to provide you with that guidance. Then we get into the annexes, again, alert and warning, evacuation, care and shelter, specifics of that, detailed checklists, job aids to carry out those functions. And then the EOC quick activation, a couple of pages with bullet points, under pressure, what are the absolute necessity things that I need to do, who do I need to communicate with, who do I need to let know that we've activated, and establish those communication corridors of information. Then disaster service workers, we in government are disaster service workers. How do we incorporate our role, and how do we incorporate volunteers into that process? Next slide. So with that, that is your plan. And I'll turn it back over to the chief to introduce the adoption, or next slide, I'm available for any questions should you have any. And I'm looking forward to those questions.
I'm looking to council for questions. We'll start at the end with Councilmember Tiedemann.
Thank you very much for the presentation and all the work that went in. Like Councilmember Jordan. I tried to curl up and read this earlier, though I didn't need a fire because of how hot it was today.
Yeah.
A couple questions. One on just a practicality. Reading through this, I think there's some pages in at least the version we have posted that are upside down in some of the appendices. So I want to make sure we can fix that at some point before we post it publicly. Very minor. On more substantial practicalities, like we mentioned, this is almost a 900-page document. Now, a lot of that is, specific pages on people's roles, so not everyone needs to read all 900 pages, but it's pretty hefty. And so I'm curious I appreciated your points about how this is an effective reference document, even if it is long. I want to make sure on that that there doesn't need to be some sort of, pared down executive summary version of this. And also I want to be clear of kind of how we introduce new people to this plan. Because if I started at the City of Albany and you plop down 800-page document in front of me, I kind of don't know where to start. I'm probably not going to be able to read it cover to cover and take it all in. So how do we kind of get people into it?
Fantastic question. Thank you for asking that. So the quick answer is, as I mentioned, it's a guidance document. It's like, I might just be old, but we used to have this manual for fixing your car. And you could go in there, and if I'm fixing the brakes, I don't need to know about the transmission. I go to the brakes and it walks me through it. So it is a lengthy document, and the plans that I draft tend to be very lengthy documents, but I have also worked several major fires, regional fires, complex fires, floods. I've worked with Department of Water Resource, running the State Operations Center response to the Oroville Dam. And I'm a master trainer with FEMA. There's only 3 of us in the nation to finish that program. What my answer is, when you're incorporating people into a position, the one thing that they need to review is, what are our priorities, our emergency management goals, number 1. So how do we prioritize the actions we take? Because under an emergency, you can't do everything. There's going to be a lot of objectives, a lot of tasks that need to get done, and we need to know what our priorities are. So that would be the first thing. Then I would direct you to the section 3 for emergency operations. Read that. Read all of that, because that's going to tell you how you're activated, where to respond, under what conditions are you activated. And that section itself provides the most information on how we activate and operate our Emergency Operations Center. The next thing that I would tell you to do is find your position within the Emergency Operations Center and go to that detailed checklist. And that'll tell you what to do before a disaster ever occurs, how to prepare for it, how to set up for it, the general duties, what we're all going to do when we activate to come in and sign in, complete your activity log, put on your vest, check in with your supervisor, receive a briefing, and prepare to do your job. Then your section, branch, or unit-specific duties. Those are the things that only you do. And so when we look at that, if I'm the section chief, let's say in the plans section, and I don't have a documentation unit leader, and I have to do that, I don't need to read the whole section checklist. I can just go to the unit-specific duties, and I can see what the documentation unit leader does, and I know those are the 15 things that I need to get done. So if you do have one, they get a comprehensive list. If we don't fill that position and the section coordinator does it, then I know exactly where to go to get that information. So those are the things that we would do, and then I would invite them to look at, any other things that they would play a role in. If they're in the law enforcement branch, then they're going to have a role in evacuation. And if that's the case, then they need to read the evacuation plan so they know. If I'm in community services and I'm in the care and shelter branch, then that care and shelter annex is going to provide me a lot of detail. Again, with law enforcement or fire, the alert and warning, knowing how to send a message, Who do we need to contact? Is it the county? Making sure we get those alerts out as soon as possible to save lives. Telling people what's occurring, what we're doing to respond to it, and what personal protective actions do we need from them. Do they need to shelter in place? Do they need to evacuate? If so, where, when, and to what location? So all of those are built with templates for those plans so that they can just fill in the details and launch those alerts right away. So there is a lot of detail in there.
Great, thank you. My other question, this may be more for staff, but it's general, of kind of how do we practice and drill this? And I want to go beyond, because I'm imagining for our fire department, you guys are probably pretty drilled at your guys' jobs. You do it all the time. You have to drill it. And it happens every so often. You have to get the ambulance out. You have to respond to a fire. I'm talking more kind of, how do we get the more expansive people who could be drawn into this plan for a bigger event? How do we get them used to this? And do we drill that? Do we do a crisis simulation on that so that everyone kind of knows how it works, even outside of the fire department or the police department?
Once adopted, we, in the first quarter of 2025, we're planning to have training specific to people's different roles as far as the groups. So training for council, training for folks who may be section leaders, and then we'll be applying that initial training into drills, where you're starting to use the material that you're learning. You lose your fear of maybe having to do this and realize it's very straightforward. As explained, there's a checklist for a reason, because we all function better with a checklist in these kinds of situations. So there's going to be quite a bit of applied use of through training with this document for all the employees, and in a general sense, but also specific to what they might be doing in their particular departments. Care and shelter is a good example. Evacuation is a good example. So those types of things. So there is training planned.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I may have lied to my wife over the weekend and said I was working on my PhD, and I'm not going to snitch on myself and say that I read the bulk of an 839-page document. But the point that Councilmember Tiedemann made, the appendices started flipping around Appendix 2 under evacuation. I don't know how I got that information. I didn't read that far. On a more serious note, though, when I was looking through the list of collaborators on the collaboration team, and this is also me just speaking from my bias from where I grew up in the city of Richmond, but I noticed the City of Richmond Police Department was not involved or listed. And I'm curious as to why, partly because City of Richmond Police, their dispatch is contracted by City of El Cerrito. And so I would assume there'd need to be better coordination there. As well, we have our housing development right there on Cleveland. And I would imagine if we are experiencing an emergency along Cleveland and a lot of new residents coming there, that we would want to coordinate appropriately with our other neighbor on the north side in the city of Richmond. I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble or grill anyone. I'm just curious if maybe folks have reached out and City of Richmond didn't reply back. Yeah.
Yeah, we did reach out to Richmond and invited them to be part of the process. While working through the police department, not all of the law enforcement agencies that we engage, including CHP, necessarily participated fully in the working groups, but we did gather information from them on some of the questions. And the police department here has worked with them extensively. And we actually have done training, and we ran a tabletop exercise a few years ago. And the city has done evacuation exercises as well. So we've incorporated information and their participation in those training opportunities to include that in the plan. But we did talk to them, but not everybody participated as much as we would like in the process. But having come from law enforcement, we were able to get plenty of information and make sure that we validated our assumptions on roles and responsibilities for that.
No, I appreciate that. And considering the nuances, I would say that's probably the most gentlest way to communicate.
I've worked with Richmond a lot in the past, so I know.
I guess my follow-up question there too is, in the context of emergency response coordination, again, in the city of Richmond, we deal with an oil giant there that is prone to issues. And so I'm curious, has there been communication in the past with Chevron's fire department or City of Richmond Fire Department and appropriate coordination? Because whenever an incident happens there, it does inherently impact us here in Albany as well.
Right, so we do have mutual aid agreements in place with those agencies, and Captain Smizer did work with those agencies and incorporate their feedback into the plan as far as overall planning partners. But some of that mutual aid agreement is sort of baked in the cake. We know how these things operate, and we would follow certain processes for different things. And that's why when we look at our planned response to different events, a lot of what we do is things that we do all the time. So whether we're looking at a mass casualty event, whether it's a result of a vehicle or a shooting or an explosion or a landslide, triaging and treating people is the same, and we'll follow those processes. So those standard operating procedures become part of what we do, and that's why right after identifying the hazard, we looked at all those agreements, made sure that they were in place, and that we were following those standardized practices. So that's how we engage those groups that may not have taken the extra step to attend a meeting because they felt like their response and their resources and capabilities that they bring to a disaster are already built into that process and are worked on a daily basis with the city.
Vice Mayor, if I might add, success is about relationships often, and we have the fire chiefs within the region, Berkeley, El Cerrito / Kensington, myself, and Richmond's new chief, Chief Osario. We have a phone call every Monday. That was at 9 o'clock this morning for me. So we bounce any of our issues off. So we're very familiar with being able to reach out. Our training's coordinated so that we're all doing the same types of things. So those communication lines are there and kept robust through constant communication.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And I'll just say on a maybe a slightly joking note, as I'm looking through potential hazards and situations, I see nothing on what to do when my 2-year-old has a diaper explosion.
That would be under biohazards.
Contain it.
Looking to see if there are any other council questions. Not seeing any other council questions, we'll open it up for public comment. Anyone in the room who would like to make public comment? We have one person in the room. Anyone online? Okay.
Hi, my name is Nick Medeiros, and there was one section in the document, page 108, and I'll just read it and perhaps I could get some clarification. It says, the City of Albany coordinates and maintains 2 pre-registered DSW volunteer classification programs, volunteers in police service, the VIPs, and animal services volunteers. And then there's 3 bullet points. Volunteers in police services provide a program comprised of adult volunteers who assist with administrative duties, non-enforcement, perform vacation house checks, school and traffic control, special events, abandoned auto abatement, radar trailer placement, illegal sign abatement, handicap parking enforcement, and present crime prevention programs. These local citizens are provided distinctive uniforms and patrol vehicles. They act as additional eyes and ears for the police department. The next bullet is ready to assist in emergency under various types and conditions. The search and rescue SAR team, highly trained group of volunteers, because the county is diverse in terrain, so on and so forth. They go into dive rescue, cliff rescue. The third bullet point, even though it lists 2, at the top is the radio amateur civil emergency services. It goes into maintaining communication systems in the event of emergency. I was surprised that it didn't mention our CERT volunteers in that section. Also, I'd just like to know more about these groups that exist here in Albany, because I haven't heard about them, and I am a registered DSW County volunteer. Thank you.
Yeah, so those are errors in that version or that draft of the plan. So there is a CERT team, a very active CERT team here in the fire department, and the county does maintain an amateur radio group that's not through the city, but that was an error in a previous draft that I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, and we'll work to address that. There may be some version control. I wasn't aware of an appendices that was upside down either, but on a 800 page, I did a pretty good job of going through it, but it starts swimming in your head. But I appreciate you bringing that up, and we'll certainly address that immediately and get a revised draft to you first thing tomorrow.
Any online comments? I'm not seeing any online comments. I'll bring it back to council.
So thank you for the presentation, for taking our questions. Like we've all mentioned, it's obvious a lot of work went into this, and it's very important that it does so. As we've covered in the last 2 city manager reports, we've had fires on the Hill, 2 of them recently, so stuff like this comes up and will continue to come up and is unavoidable. So I really appreciate us thinking about it and figuring out how to manage that and have a good response. And I especially appreciate the answer to my question about sort of training on this and drilling and simulating it. I have had the chance to engage in some crisis simulation activities during my graduate studies program, and I think it's very, very useful and fun and interesting stuff. So I think as much as that we can do to make this rote for everybody, as rote as I imagine it is for the fire department, for all of us, for all city staff, would be really good. It's also reminding me I should probably look up what my job is for my day job for the county, because I could be called in at any moment. But again, just want to reiterate my thanks on this, and I'll be ready to move the resolution when we get to that point.
Not seeing any other comments. I'll entertain motions.
I'll move Resolution 2024-72 with the notes we discussed and were brought up during public comment for later corrections.
I will second with thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
Councilmember Tiedemann?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lopez?
Yep.
Mayor Mickey?
Yes.
Councilmember Hanson Romero?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will say, just as one commentary, I appreciate that we have a document that I can look at And I can understand what I'm supposed to do as mayor if something were to occur, so. With that, I will look to council and see if we are able to charge ahead or if we would like to take a small break. Okay. So we will keep moving on. Let's see, we have no items in 9 or 10, so we move on to item 11, new business, updated salary schedule for City of Albany employees.
Good evening, council members. Penny Ha, Human Resource Director, comes in front of you, front of council this evening to request the approval of the updated salary schedule for city employees. The salary schedule incorporates the negotiated salary increases in accordance to the AFFA and the SEIU Local 1021 MOU. And we are also asking for the approval of a 3% cost of living adjustment and a market equity adjustment for the unrepresented employees in an effort to be competitive with comparable cities. All of which is to go into effect, should you approve, effective October the 14th.
Thank you. Look to council. If any council members have questions? Not seeing any questions. I'll see, do we have any online comments? Not seeing any online comments. Going once, twice, 3 times. Okay. I'll bring it back to council for discussion.
Move adoption of Resolution 2024-73.
I'll second.
Councilmember Hanson Romero,
Yes.
Councilmember Jordan,
Thanks to staff, yes.
Councilmember Tiedemann,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lopez,
Yep.
and Mayor Mickey.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
And thank you for sticking through all the other stuff and giving us that brief presentation.
Moving on with item 12, council subcommittee reports, council member reports on appointed representation of Albany and other meetings and events. Who would like to go first?
I can go. I've got some fun ones. There was a meeting of the ABAG Executive Board last month where we had a presentation from the president of that board about the removal of the bond from the ballots. Suffice to say, it was a complicated decision that, but is not dead forever. That BAFA, ABAG, and MTC will be working to bring that back, and in the meantime, focus on a lot of the existing programs and pilot funds that BAFA does have. We also celebrate the retirement of MTC ABAG's Deputy Director of Local Programs, or Local Government Services, Brad Paul, endorsed Propositions 4 and 5, and talked about Plan Bay Area 2050 Plus, which is going through its design process, and I encourage anyone who has interest to take a look at it and get involved, as there are more chances to give feedback on that coming up in more pop-up sessions. That is a plan that governs a huge amount of transportation, housing, and planning decisions for the Bay Area in the future. We also had a meeting of the AVA Board of Directors last month, where we had one substantive item, which was whether to accept or reject a free allocation of nuclear energy from PG&E to go towards our Bright Choice energy mix, which passed on a 10-5 vote to accept. So we'll be going towards that energy mix and will be making us have fewer greenhouse gas emissions in the future from AVA. So I was very excited about. I think that's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Tiedemann.
May I ask a question, if I might? So will that lower the price of Bright Choice? Because isn't that the power and difference charge, part of the power and difference charge?
It will not by itself lower the price of Bright Choice, because essentially we're going to be reinvesting the money we save from getting that free allocation into having more clean energy in the future. So this will basically get us to our 2030 goals of having no emissions faster and do the changeover to all the renewables quicker. So we're reinvesting the money we save.
Nice, thank you.
I had attended on behalf of Mayor Mickey the Cal City's East Bay Division meeting in Dublin at the Wave. That was my first time there. It was quite the experience to be in a very warm evening setting, and the pools are right there. Way to taunt me. But it was a very productive meeting. We had voting on leadership going forward. Alexander Walker Griffin, former mayor of Hercules, now assumed top leadership role with East Bay Division. As well, we recently, at the same day, at the same time, had the Dean Advisory Committee meeting for the Giltrack Farm, which I couldn't attend, but I did get a lot of positive feedback that the Giltrack Farm is very appreciative of the city council for their continued support and presence. I had, excuse me, there was one more thing on my list of things that I had accomplished since we last met, and I'm completely blanking.
ACMAD related?
Huh?
ACMAD related?
ACMAD meeting is going to be next week. They had postponed or canceled last month because there's a separate conference going on. And then, Albany Rollers and Strollers event at Ocean View Park. We were invited, council was invited to attend. I did go there and say a few words, give my appreciation for a local organization doing good work around here. My chief of staff fell asleep halfway through the program, so I knew it was time to roll out. Speaking of chief of staff, he convinced me to allow him to go visit another city hall for his birthday. So we took him to go see the real Mayor Mickey in Disneyland. And we had quite the opportunity to discuss policy.
I don't know about real, but you could say the first.
Yeah, so I attended the Alameda County Library Advisory Commission meeting, which was at the Albany Library this time, which being the northern outpost with the rest of the county library system quite to the south was a treat to have everybody come here and learn some things about our library that relative to the rest of the system that I didn't know. One, the head librarian there, stated that basically every adult in Albany has a library card, which is unusual, and that more than half of the materials that circulate are taken out by adults, which is the only branch in the system for which that's the case. So I thought that was quite interesting and testament to the uniqueness of the community here. On the Alameda County Transportation Commission, it had its committee meetings today, so programs, policy, and legislation, and it's developing, staff put forward the policy blueprint for the next countywide transportation expenditure plan or next countywide transportation plan, which covers the next 4 or 5 years once it's adopted. And that looks good. It's got 4 goals. I've reported before that I've sought to have that plan for the first time incorporate sidewalk conditions and maintenance, and that has in fact been incorporated as one of the major transportation systems in the county. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Well, I unfortunately had missed the JPA meeting. They had moved it, and I had a client visit, so I was unable to attend. But based upon the agenda, if anybody's interested in looking into this further, they had a report on the financials, both operations and the CIP fund, as well as the parks tax contribution to the JPA fund. There's new fees, which nothing gets cheaper, it looks like, quite significant fee jump from what I can assess. And just some updates on the Tom Bates Sports Complex project and replacement of the artificial turf in 2028. So.
I heard at some point that maybe there was a bathroom facility in the works, like a structure as opposed to.
Yeah, so, sorry, as the alternate, I get the emails as well. I could not attend either, but as part of the work program that will be completed by the end of the summer of 2026, there will be a new concession stands, bathrooms, pickleball courts, and one additional soccer field. And that was, they had plans for for more work, but they did not receive the grants to do additional work that they wanted to do. But they are able to move forward with that. And one of the big things was with the Gilman interchange changes, they were able to save somewhere north of $2 million in bringing water down to the fields, which was the water and sewer, which is the big issue why they didn't have restrooms or concession stands. So now with that done, they're moving forward with all.
And why we don't have water to our waterfront. Domestic water. Too expensive.
You did updates. I'm the only one left. Okay. I didn't have any meetings. Thanks very much to Vice Mayor Lopez for attending the meeting for me, the East Bay Division. One event that I did attend this weekend was the, I'm going to pronounce this probably wrong, but the Bon Marche? Now you pronounce it. Marche. It's French. So, which was the used clothing gear sale and costume swap this weekend on Saturday next to the Abrams Gallery. Really, really wonderful event. Lots of people out there. It was extremely warm, but there were a lot of people there. I happened to pick up a few items, a couple vases that were really wonderful. But I think that was a wonderful event and something that, while led by groups outside of the city and outside of us as council, can help us meet our climate goals. So, reuse. Let's see. I will see if there's any public comment. No one's in the room. None online. So we'll move on to item 13, future agenda items. Any members online wishing to ask for future agenda items? Once, twice? Okay. Any council notes on future agenda items? Let's see, so moving on then to item 14, announcements of city meetings and events. If you look online at today's agenda, you can see the packed series of events that we as a city have over the next few weeks. And with that, we'll move to adjournment. Thank you to all that took part in today's meeting. Tonight's meeting, I'll close by asking Councilmember Tiedemann to lead us.
Thank you, Mayor. Following up on my request earlier, we are closing tonight in honor of those lost on this day a year ago and those lost in the fighting and violence since then. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Tiedemann. And with that, I'll adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you, everyone.